Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Honest Hour, where you've got four honest realtors. We're going to dive deep into the housing market and talk about some of the issues that are making the news today. So we're joined by EJ Bugayong in Richmond, and we're joined by Tyson Kliem in Langley, and Norm Hiller in East Vancouver, and myself, Christian B, here in Burnaby. And these gentlemen, while we live in those locations, we cover those locations and some of the surrounding areas as well. So feel free to reach out to these guys. They know their stuff. They're pretty damn good. So for today's video, we're going to start with EJ. We all have brought different topics here for discussion, and we're going to be hitting the tennis ball back and forth towards each other here, playing doubles tennis. EJ, why don't you kick us off?
All right, so I'm actually gonna share my screen here really quick. And this is the data from May for the Greater Vancouver area here. And it has home sales down in May, while inventory continues to increase. You can see May 2023 for homes sold versus May 2024, and a lot more inventory coming up. And then same in the Fraser Valley over here. Spring inventory continues to build in the Fraser Valley to levels not seen in nearly 5 years. So looking at the question that I have is, hold on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. With rising home inventory and home sales decreasing in both the Fraser Valley and Greater Vancouver area, what are your predictions for the upcoming fall market, which is traditionally the second busiest time of the year?
Tyson.
Oh man, I think a lot of it has to connect with interest rates because I think, well, and there's a whole. I think we can dive deep into a bunch of reasons why has supply increased. Is it because of capital gains stuff that the government's rolled in? Is it because of increased tenancy and stricter tenancy laws? There's a bunch of different factors where I think it's creating a bit of a perfect storm where it's disincentivizing people who normally would invest in real estate from backing away from investing. But for prices, when it comes to the fall or with the market, I think the market will be a little bit busier, but I think it's all going to depend on interest rates and what's going to happen. If there's going to be another 0.25 decrease in July, I think that will really, because even though it doesn't really affect much with qualification, it will affect a lot more with sentiment and how people feel the market's going. I'm already starting to hear some stuff from clients out here where they anticipate rates are going to come down, meaning prices are going to go up. I don't think we're going to see it massively impact the fall market. I think we'll see more activity, but I think we'll maybe see a modest bump up, but I think it's going to remain relatively flat, if not a slight increase or yeah.
Tyson, I got a question for you, though. If the US Fed doesn't decrease rates, do you think Canada will decrease again?
I think we still have a little bit of room before it really starts affecting our dollar. I think we got another one or two. That's what economists are saying. We can afford one or two more in decreases. But it sounds like, now I don't have facts to verify this, but it looked like the US CPI was pretty negative or not good. This last week or so. I need to verify that, but which would mean that it would be a favorable environment for them to look at decreasing, but it's just a matter of when. And also depends on what Tick Mafflin decides, right? He says we're not tied to the US Fed and looks like we're decoupling a little bit from it, but I don't know.
Okay. Norm, what do you think? Where do sales go?
I'm still seeing the odd multiple offer here and there, not very often, but when I do, it's typically, reserved for the move-in ready, renovated homes, ready to go, or sometimes the, grossly underpriced ones. It's going to be refreshing to see less and less of that. I think buyers are really exhausted of it and just, wanting to move on from that and not have that unnecessary competition. Do I think it's going to affect prices that much? I think what was going to change is if we see another rate decrease, that's going to give the confidence in the market. And I think that'll probably, help out a little bit more with the market. But I totally agree with Tyson right now. I think a lot of investors are shying away from real estate. It's you know, from what I'm seeing, it's all end users. I'm not seeing any investors right now at the moment. So I see things very level for quite some time, unless rates decrease, you know, at least one more time. But that's just my best educated guess.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I just checked 3.27%. That's the inflation rate in the United States. So it's actually come down quite a bit, just a tick above 3%. That's pretty good for them too, because their economy's been a lot hotter than ours. As for the market, to be honest, I've been wrong so far this year. I really thought this would be a rebound year because we've had a couple of slow years. Really, since April of 2022, things have tailed off, right? As interest rates rose. So I'm surprised that it's been as slow as it has. I'm glad you pulled that up, EJ, because those numbers kind of really well, stunned me. Maybe that's a bit of a strong word, but I was surprised to see they were 20% below where they normally are this time of year, 20 over, over a 10-year span. So surprising. Looks like we're gonna have another low sales year. It doesn't make much of a difference on prices, though. I don't see prices really coming down. Do you guys see that
No.
on any product types, like whether it's detached townhouses or condos?
No, I think that's a big thing that you kind of mentioned is that although it is slower, like I'm still seeing sellers who are like, I want my price. Like this one sold last year, I want it. And with people who are still selling, needing to buy, the buyer's like, okay, I'll give it to you because this is a property that they kind of want. So it's very interesting to see that it is definitely slower. And as we kind of chatted before, we can feel it and we can see it with our clients, but looking at it compared to prices a few years ago, it's still quite a bit up there. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the fall.
I feel people sense that we're at the bottom. Like with interest rates starting now to come down, I think a lot of people are, it seems like, and I feel like our population's more educated than ever before on when it comes to understanding these things, where you go, okay, interest rates, if they start going down, prices, that means prices are going to start coming up. And so I think people are getting that sense there. And that's what I was saying, a lot of sentiment. It all depends on that because we're such a sentiment sensitive society or market. And so, yeah, I don't think we're going to see prices continue to decrease. Although we are seeing houses going for under list price when they're getting accepted. That's because people are still having an expectation of higher prices.
Norm, what do you tell your clients who say, look, I'm just going to wait another 6 months for one or two more rate decreases, and then I'll pull the trigger.
Well, I mean, that's a risk that they need to be willing to take. I mean, if rates are going down, you know, prices should in theory be going up. And, you know, if they can make their educated guess, I do feel like we're a bit of a frog in a pot of boiling water, because I'm looking back on some of these sales from a year ago and now doing a market evaluation. I used to only pull up sales, you know, in a crazy hot market 2 weeks. After that, you know, if you're going 4 weeks back, you're having to increase that sale price to actually win in multiple offers. Otherwise, you're not going to get it. I'm actually going back about a year to last June on a lot of these condos. And to be honest, it depends on the location, but and the product, but some of the homes are actually a little bit lower. You don't notice the price decrease, but you go back a year and they're selling about the same amount, sometimes even lower. But it all depends on location, type of home, things like that. So, you know, as much as people say the market hasn't come down, it all depends really what you're looking at. And I'm looking back a year now to do a market evaluation, whereas that was unheard of in 14 years. I haven't really done that much. It's usually been 3 months, 2 months. And if there's not a lot of sales on a specific complex, I'm going back 6 months and adjusting for the market. And now we can actually do about a year, depending on what it is.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, so I'd just like to add one more thing here is that although it is slow, and I'm not too sure how you guys are feeling with your clients, but it's not just slow because all our clients are like, I don't want to do anything. I'm good. I'm just going to stay here. A lot of them just are still on the sidelines. So if they're not coming in September, I feel like they're going to come at some point. So whether it's one or two more rate decreases or something else happening in the market to get that market going, it may not be busy in September, but yeah, I think it's going to to kind of be busy again at some point.
Well, and I know with
Mhm.
a lot of young couples, I think they're waiting for them so they can qualify for more. 'Cause they're probably either pretty tapped out at what they can qualify for, and so there's no real room left financially for them to, and so they're waiting for rates if they can come down a little bit, and if the bond, you know, the bond market changes and drops, then that will allow their qualification to increase just so slightly that they can jump into something to upsize in. That's a lot of our market is young, a lot of young families who are doing that.
Yeah.
So that's what they're really waiting on.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a couple of brokers and some of the, I mean, you're right, the bond yields are correlated to fixed interest rates, and some as low as 4.73 to 4.99 on 3-year fixeds. So not bad, not bad. And if we get one or two more of these rate decreases, I wonder if we get a bit of a stampede effect, right? If you had
Yeah.
another 50 basis points, and then of course, you're looking at multiple offers, and it's the whole gong show all over again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What will be interesting to see, sorry, just to cut in, is what will the CPI data look like now that they've dropped interest rates by 0.25? Because I know housing was a big part of our CPI, like part of the high CPI that we've been having, and then also I noticed gas prices have been coming down. And so those are some of the biggest contributors to to inflation. I wonder how that's going to change things now as they drop interest rates. Is it going to put us below the CPI data on a per capita basis than what they were finding?
Norm?
Do you
You're
want to go
good.
ahead?
Okay, you're good. Okay, let's go over topic number 2. Norm, we're gonna throw it out to you. You got the mic.
Okay. So there's been a bit of chatter amongst realtors about what's the appropriate way to disclose measurements on a listing. A lot of people say, measure it and, puff up your chest and, show the biggest there is, and that is the right thing for a client. But a lot of buyers want to see measurements from the strata plan. That's typically what BC assessment follows as well, which, that's a very quick go-to place to, check out. 99% sure that's typically the right way of seeing what the strata plan says. But what should we be disclosing? What's on the strata plan, which is, for people who don't know, it's the architectural drawings, or how we measure it out at. Currently, our requirements are, it doesn't matter. We just need to disclose where we get the measurements from. So, what should the public care about? And what do realtors care about? And what do we think should be advertised? So I personally think it should be the strata plan. And if that doesn't, people still think otherwise, maybe we should do both. So what are your guys' thoughts?
This is a good question. I'll jump in here because I've had this issue in the past where, you're looking at the comparable sales data and you take whatever the listed square footage is on the MLS listing. Let's say it's 967 square feet and you're saying it's $1,000 a square foot. Okay, that's 967. But it turns out the condo's a lot smaller. It's 905 square feet, right? And now the buyer is upset because they feel like they're overpaying and they don't know what to believe. What numbers on the MLS listing data sheet are really correct? And I agree with you. I don't know why this happens. I think these laser measurement companies come in. It's the same on my listings too. They measure it and they tend to be bigger than the strata plan's measurements. And if you call 3 different measurement companies to come in, they all give you 3 different measurements. So I don't know how they do it, but what I do, and I think what all of you guys probably do as well, is I put in the realtor remarks that this is what the strata plan says, so that the buyer working with the realtor knows exactly what the strata plan says and that there's no confusion about it.
Yeah. I do the same actually, Christian. And I find when I'm representing a buyer, I mean, if it's a couple square feet off, I don't usually say anything. But if it's like 10 plus square feet off on a little 500 square foot condo, I'll actually have that in the offer that the buyer acknowledges that the strata plan states, and then I write it in square feet. Because it also covers myself too. I don't want my buyers coming back later, and I usually have them place an initial right beside it. you know, I've disclosed it to you, I've had you initial buy it. I want you to know, right? It's an informed decision, and that's what it's all about here. So I personally think it's really important.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think, Christian, you kind of mentioned it. I've also seen different listings where they have it professionally measured, and I don't know how they do it, but yeah, 3 different measurements for professional floor plans. And, when it's off, 10, 20, 30 square feet for a property, it makes a big difference. So it is kind of challenging. And that's where you kind of really want to have a good realtor on your side to kind of help guide you through that process, because if they don't and they don't realize that, hey, this is from the professional measurement company, but everyone else is going by the strata plan or whatnot, like you could be paying, tens of $1,000s more. You may have you may get the property, but you may have overpaid as well.
And it makes a big difference when you're in 1,000 square foot condo, have an extra 50 square feet or so, like that makes a big difference. Now I know there's a bit of a variance that is permitted in there. Was it 10% on the square footage, total square footage of a place? The one interesting thing I find too is if people they also put in a garage and a townhouse or something like that as square footage, and when it actually should not count towards the square footage, but they put that, and I've been seeing it marketed in that way. I don't know if you guys have any input or thoughts on that, but they deem it as unfinished space, which it technically shouldn't be. But what's your thoughts? You guys are the experts.
Well, I've come across that actually here in Burnaby, where I was looking at one of the older townhouse complexes, and they included the deck on the main level inside the actual measurements for the home. And when you pull up the strata plan, and this is an old strata plan, right? This is going back to like early 1970s, and you can barely even see the delineation on the strata plan. And I've had this where I've brought it up to the sellers and said, by the way, I know that you bought it and it said that it was 2,000 square feet. In actuality, the inside of your space is only 1,600 square feet. That's counting the deck on the main level, right? And, they were, in that instance, the sellers were kind of shocked. They thought, well, wait a minute, that's how we bought it. That's how we should advertise it. So you can't do that. You can't do that. So that didn't end well for me.
I was going to say that. I was going to say,
it didn't end well. No, they're like, no, we got to advertise it the same way. I said, but that's not the way you can do it, right? It's anyway.
Yeah.
So
I've heard of that quite a few times, actually. Complexes in the 70s, older ones. I've even heard of the odd case where parking stall is part of the strata lot, where that gets included. I've never seen it. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, a buyer sees it, they like what they see, they like the measurements, as per viewed. And I think that's kind of most important, because efficiency of floor plan is huge, especially the smaller of a condo you go. That's kind of number one. But I really think we should be disclosing strata plan. It skews the statistics as well. And I find when you're working with analytical buyers, you're pulling up 20 different strata plans, trying to confirm every single listing for them, because that's what they're wanting to calculate on. And I get it. And in the end, they're so laser focused on that, and they're not looking at the condition of the other comparables. And it's really tough, for analytical buyers.
yeah, you don't want to get lost in the weeds. I think going back to your earlier point there, Norm, I mean, okay, maybe it's 27 square feet smaller than what it says on the MLS, but do you like the home?
Yeah.
Do you like the location? Right? Do you like the improvements they made? I mean, these are going to be much more important questions than the 27 square feet.
Yep.
And that's where I think we need to allow for a bit of that variance, right? Like to have some of that room in there, because you said 3 different, measurement companies will come with 3 different measurements, the strata plan. And, even part of that too is, what is on plan versus what is actually built sometimes is not necessarily equal the same. And so it's also just trying to find out, okay, where is it proper? But if that variance is like, it's only 20 square feet, is that enough of a difference? Yeah, and again, Christian, you're bang on. Like if they like the place, if it looks good, their furniture will fit where it says it's going to fit and all that, then hey, I go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, guys, if you want, I'll jump ahead with topic number 3.
Good.
And topic number 3, courtesy of the Vancouver Sun, there was an article this morning. This is on Monday, June the 24th, on the densification that we're expected to get on June the 30th this year, right? I think it's Bill 44 introduced at the BC legislature. And this is to require municipalities with 5,000 or more people to put fourplexes on lots, and as many as a sixplex if it's close to transit that gets used, I think, every 15 minutes, is what I read somewhere else. So a couple of interesting tidbits I got from this article, and then I'll throw out a couple of questions to you guys. They quoted someone who was doing the numbers on this and said to build a fourplex of 4,000 square feet is going to cost the builder about $1.6 to $2 million. So let's use $2 million. It costs about $2 million to acquire the land, pretty much anywhere from Vancouver, Richmond, all the way to New West, right? So that's $4 million right off the bat. And we haven't even factored in property transfer taxes, real estate fees, holding costs, permitting
GST,
costs. Say again?
GST if it's new.
Right. So I'm thinking that if this comes to fruition, that family-friendly fourplex in that leafy neighborhood is going to cost buyers upwards of $1.3 to $1.5 million. And so the question is, and I don't have an answer to it really, is, I mean, do you see a lot of people jumping at living in residential neighborhoods, paying 1.3 to 1.5 for 2 to 3 bedroom, 1,000 square foot units in these homes? You don't look excited, guys.
No.
So I'll jump in here quickly. I completely agree with you, Christian. I think it sounds great in theory. It's going to be a lot more expensive than people think it's going to be. Everything from renovations, construction, it all costs so much because housing is so expensive here. The contractors, the trades, they all live here. They all charge an astronomical amount because they need to pay their bills too. Another thing that a lot of people aren't thinking about or looking at, and I've recently dealt with this too, is this 4, 5, 6, 8plex going to override environmental requirements of a lot? And I really don't think it's going to. So any lot that has a creek beside it, has trees by it, perhaps even homes near peat bog area in Vancouver, for example, or is this going to be automatically approved, or is this going to have to go to Board of Variance, or is the city going to say, no, we can't approve that because of environmental, which I'm pretty sure that's just not going to get approved. So I think a lot of people are counting their chickens before their eggs are hatched and, thinking that they're going to get a big payout when I really don't think that's the case. I think a standard lot or slightly wider where it's very feasible to do, great. It's probably a perfect lot for it. But I think anything else, I wouldn't be counting on it and holding my breath.
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of look at it, the whole purpose of this was to, increase the amount of inventory that's out there and make it more affordable for people to get in. But 1,000 square feet for 1.3 million, like that doesn't make, plus GST, that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, just even when you were just talking about it, I was like, I wouldn't recommend to my clients at all. I mean, depending on the neighborhood and some buyers out there, if they really wanted to be in a neighborhood and they couldn't do it, and if it was really expensive in that neighborhood and 1.3 made sense, then possibly. But yeah, I don't see that kind of making sense, because when you look at it, when they said you're going to be able to have that increased density and more inventory, you'd think, okay, pricing would be more affordable. Like, let's get that 1,000 square foot and maybe for like 700K, 750K, but double that amount seems insane. Like, I just don't see it kind of working out, unfortunately, unless they figure out a way to make it more affordable for people to get in.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but about 1.5 million will get you a detached house here in Walnut Grove, or like a 3-4 bedroom house on a 6 or 7,000 square foot lot. And so I think people just look at a quality of living standpoint and they go, you know what, it's probably worth doing a 45-minute commute to have a place where we can have a place to grow our family and not be stuck here. And look at that. I think that's the question people are going to start asking, or you're just not going to get family friendly stuff. And I get this question a lot. They're going, "Oh, great. So does this mean I can build a fourplex?" Yeah, it does mean you can build a fourplex, but what's the cost to tear down your place? If your place is older, to do all the asbestos abatement work and all that sort of stuff you have to do there too. There's going to be a lot more work putting into it just to get your place at ground zero, where you can now build something, and then the cost of building per square foot is going to be so much. I think it's not financially viable unless you get it placed for lot value. I don't think it's financially viable for a lot of these, even for a builder to do the work. And so I think that's the biggest part. And now, can you guys clarify for me, are those stratified lots? Like, are they individually set, or is that just like one title for those fourplex?
Good question, Tyson. That was an item in the article, and the province is going to encourage it that they be stratified lots, because yeah, you're right. I mean, someone could build a fourplex on their property, live in one, and rent out the other three. I guess if you're mortgage free and you got some cash in the bank, that could be a possibility. I'm sure even people would be like salivating at the idea of that. That'd be some serious rental income, right, Norm?
Yeah.
But no, the way I was thinking about this is 1,000 square feet is just too small. Like, I mean, if they cranked up the numbers to, let's say, 1,500 for each of the units, now you're getting a 6,000 square foot building on that lot. I don't know how much yard there is or where the parking's going to be, but 1,500 square foot, okay, now I'm starting to get interested, because that's the size of a lot of the modern townhomes that we see, right?
I'm going to jump in really quickly here again. I don't mean to be negative, but I encourage people to, in Vancouver, there's these half duplexes on a, not that big of a lot. Go in one, take a look, and take a look at the closets, because this is what I find, it's not livable. People love it. It looks great. You open up the closets, you can't even put a coat hanger in there. They're not very deep at all, some of these makeshift closets that are in there. So all of a sudden you build in a real closet into that room, the bedroom becomes useless. They're not very user-friendly homes. The storage is pitiful in some of them. So in my opinion, it should almost be like 3 units on a standard lot instead of 4, or get a slightly wider lot and 4 becomes a lot easier. And then when people see the price, oh yeah, that price works, but it's not a very livable home. You look up a higher price point, add another 100 grand, you're going to be in a way nicer quality of build, better livability in that type of home as well. And that's, I think, what a lot of people aren't factoring in, is you get the bare minimum, it's pretty pitiful. I've seen some of these detached townhomes in Vancouver, they have the garage space and you're looking at it. How are you even going to fit a Mini Cooper in there? Never mind a SUV that most families have. They don't fit. You'd have to get out of your car, push it in. And when you get out in the morning, you're going to have to push it out and then get in your vehicle. You simply can't use those garages, some of them.
Yeah.
That's a good workout, though. That's a good workout, though.
Yeah.
Way to be positive.
Hyundai Ioniq 5, I think they have that little feature now. You push a button on your remote and the car actually pulls in for you, so you can get out of it, and then it pulls straight in for you and pulls out. So maybe they're onto something. They're future innovative thinkers. But I think the interesting thing, Christian, with this and with this coming out June 30th, is I know like Langley Township and some other townships or municipalities are protesting this, and a lot of them have really upped their development costs to try and make a bit of a statement on this. So it's very interesting, and the reason why the township of Langley is because they said we just rolled out we spent years developing a new OCP for the Brookswood area, and we were planning on doubling density already, but now with this new provincial zoning in, it's going to 4x the amount of zoning for this one area of Brookswood. So they're going, we don't have the infrastructure, and is the government going to give us the schooling? Is it going to give us the treatment facilities for sewage and all that? Are they going to provide all that for us if they want us to 4x this one area that we've already increased the zoning on? So that's the interesting thing, is to see what are the municipalities' plans going to look like, because they had to submit it. and which ones are going to be protesting it, and it's creating a lot of, yeah, I know it's stirring the pot for sure.
I wonder how this goes over with the electorate, because we've got an election coming up later this fall, and I can see this one being very unpopular in in communities like Langley,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and also in Abbotsford, one of our clients sits on a lot that's zoned for duplex, and he's thinking, "Sweet, I can cash in on here." But we just had to kind of break it to him, say, "Hey, well, your neighbor lot right behind you, they can do the exact same thing that you want to do with this." And so what he was thinking, he was sitting on this lot that had potential value or more value than neighboring lots around it. We're having to say, "Hey, actually, we think it's going to be not much different because of now the provincial zoning," and so that affects his future nest egg and what he was hoping to retire on. Is his personal residence, but has that effect as well too. So it'll be interesting to see kind of all the other nuances and effects, the side effects that they weren't anticipated.
Yeah, because a big one for me too is how it changes the look and feel of the neighborhood, right? So, and a good example out this way, just a bit further east from where I am, is New West and west of Queens Park. It's just right to Sixth. It's a beautiful neighborhood. It's just old 100, 120-year-old homes. Great for taking the kids during Halloween walk. It's just beautiful. The way the neighborhood is tree lined and everything. And so what's going to happen to these homes? New West has been very strict about maintaining the character, look and feel of their homes and neighborhoods. And my understanding is this bill would override all of that, right? And so do these things, can someone just tear down their home and build a fourplex? Definitely going to change the look of the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move along. Tyson, you got
Yes.
the mic.
All right, guys. Well, as we know, was it last month or so, the government rolled out in their budget, or maybe 2 months ago, the new capital gains and how they're increasing the capital gains from 50% to now 66% at the max. Now it indexes up as your capital gain is increasing or has increased, but it's going to be interesting to see how this is going to affect a lot of things. I think this is probably one of the reasons why we're seeing such a boost in inventory out in the market, as we have investors and other ones looking to get out. We just had a client ourselves who sold off their detached house and they want to get it done before this new capital gains inclusion rate increase has been brought into law. But this is going to affect people with a lot of net worth sitting on it. The maximum amount, if it's a $5 million capital gain, which would be crazy, you probably see that more out in your guys' region, Vancouver, but that would mean they're going to be paying $424,000 more in tax on that capital gain. And so I just want to hear your guys' input on this and get your guys' take on the new capital gains increase. And how is this going to affect the real estate market? How is this going to affect things in total, and get your guys' take on it? So what are your guys' thoughts?
I'll jump in quick. I think these people who have tried to beat the time limit, it's up today because tomorrow it changes.
Yeah.
So I have one client who we're completing today. I know a banker who opens up accounts for new practices like veterinarians, dentists, things like that. And all of a sudden, there's all this product over the last couple of months available because some of these people are trying to get grandfathered in and pay the lower tax. So there has been a bit more product available because of that. I think that's going to level off as of today, or even a week ago, because if they haven't sold already, you can't complete in under a week. What change is it going to do? I think a lot of people are just going to hold indefinitely, or investors just aren't going to buy. They're going to buy stocks. And if you have a huge gain, they're just going to break it up over a couple of years to sell off a little bit at a time. You can't really do that with real estate. So we're really de-incentivizing investors, which is really not good. It really helps homeowners try to get into the market, but that's not helping any tenants whatsoever. They're just going to sell and move up to a larger home. And instead of buying a secondary property to rent out, they're going to buy stocks.
Well, and also how will it affect pre-sale? Because a lot of pre-sales, they need to raise 60% capital before they can put a shovel into the ground. And that really counted on quote unquote speculators and other people who had that, and they would actually tie up their asset or their capital in a project, but it would help fund the build of that project. And so now, is that going to affect a lot of our pre-sale market, therefore affecting a lot of new housing inventory and building, therefore creating a further crunch about 5 years from now where there'll be less housing supply? I don't know. That's just a thought. If you look down the chain, it's going to affect things. I think, and we're going to be in a further housing crunch than we are today.
Yeah, can I just building on Tyson's point, I think on how this affects the pre-sale market is going to be very interesting to watch, because you see a lot of these projects, like we saw a lot of them in North Surrey, in the Guildford area or the Wally area, an area that really needs a facelift, right? And you'd have a lot of these sort of 4 or 5 story wood frame projects, and the developers there are newerish, maybe 5-10 years in the business, and they're not building, fancy schmancy stuff. It's a very entry-level product. Cheap is another word for it. And what they do is in the pre-sales phase, the VIP phase, they release it to realtors and their contacts. And I know that there's groups of agents who will bring in 50 clients and help basically sell 50% of this low-rise townhouse complex. Well, that's because it makes sense, because the price points were so low for some of these Wally projects. But you add the capital gains tax now on top of that, from what, 50% to 67%, right? After 250,000. It's just another disincentive, I think, to get into the pre-sale market. So it'll be interesting, but how that unfolds. I don't know, EJ, thoughts on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Or on other, maybe not pre-sale specifically.
Yeah, just kind of in regards to inventory, definitely have seen more, vacant properties going up for sale over these last few months because of the new capital gains tax. It's very interesting, as you guys kind of mentioned, that when these start selling again, the people who are going to occupy are people who are going to be living in it. So that's one less property that's going to be available to be able to rent out. So it's very interesting that could be put a bit of a strain on the rental market. But there's been a lot of things now that they've been adding to make it harder for investors to kind of want to get into the market or continue investing, which will have an impact. One interesting point is I do work with some investors. Their kind of plan is more long-term. So I actually didn't get any calls from them to be like, hey, we want to sell, which is great, because a lot of their plans were, well, when the equity kind of goes up, we kind of refinance, take that money out and buy another property. So it's always continued to leverage, make the numbers make sense when you refinance, and then kind of keep at it. Obviously, real estate is a long-term play. So, this wasn't kind of hold from like 2 or 3 years ago. They've been holding for a long time, but for some of these investors, they're wanting to kind of build their portfolio and refinance instead of sell. The goal was never to sell. It was always to kind of refinance and pull out to get the next property there.
Guys, for the let's say your client network, or even for yourselves, what's the sentiment? Are you finding that people are less likely to pull the trigger on an investment property in real estate these days versus maybe 5-10 years ago?
Yes, I would say so. I think, and again, perfect storm, capital gains, house flipping taxes that just came in, which on a pre-sale doesn't really affect us. The time for completion on those a lot longer, but also There's a few rental tenancy laws that are getting stricter and stricter. Where now, if they're going to be ruling in the 4-month notice on that, that's going to be interesting. You know, to 4-month eviction notice. That's going to be a lot more difficult in real estate. So we have a lot more who are backing away from it. And even my own personal financial planner, who he has some real estate assets, he pulled out of them because he's like, the government's doing everything they can right now to disincentivize people from investing in real estate. And so he's like, I'm going to follow suit now. I'm going to put my money elsewhere. But the problem is we're going to see the impact of that down the road. And this is the ridiculous part, is just how I think how the government said, well, this is only going to affect like 1% of Canadians, this new tax is going to come out. But that is such a lie. It's already been proven that it's their math is off on it. And the other part with it too, going away from real estate, is that it affects also it's right away on corporations. So corporations now have to, in small corporations, it's not just 50% anymore, it goes right to 66% or 67% from the get-go. There's no index rate up. And so for doctors, for other professionals who were hoping on doctors, like especially doctors who are hoping to use that as a retirement, now it's going to affect them. And that's going to affect furthermore the quality of living in our country. It's just, there's things here I don't think were thought of well, but.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Or, you know, EJ.
Yeah, so investor-wise, I think before maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I'd say 10% of all my deals were through investors. Kind of an active investor myself, but as kind of Tyson mentioned, it is kind of more challenging now, to where, you know, the numbers don't make as much sense with the interest rates and how much you got to put down. I've kind of spoken to some of my clients, and I actually kind of mentioned, you know, if you have to make a move, your next best bet, if you're looking at investing, is to, you know, upgrade to a fixer-upper. Like if you need to move or have a growing family, is to find a fixer-upper and fix it up, and then maybe sell in a few years and kind of do it again, because at least you have a bit more control of your destiny. You can always stay in it if things don't do great, but you can also kind of build that equity. And you know, I still have investment properties with the tenant in there, but you know, when you buy your own place and fix it up, you don't have to deal with the tenant. So yeah, it's definitely kind of a different way to invest, but yeah, it's just kind of just making it a lot more challenging for investment properties at this stage.
I haven't had a single investor client ever since this was announced. Typically, I, you know, routinely have them, you know, throughout the year, but I haven't had a single one approach me. And quite frankly, I mean, what do you say if they bring up, you know, the argument of, you know, why wouldn't I just buy stocks? You can sell them over a couple of years and realize less of a gain and be taxed in a lower bracket. I completely agree with them. So I haven't had a single investor since it was announced, and you know, I can totally would have expected that. I think you're absolutely right, and that's a scary thought about what's going to happen with our doctors. You know, if they're relying on that capital gain in their savings for retirement, are we going to lose a bunch of doctors? And that's a scary thought, because we already have a huge crisis there too.
And I think the other issue here when it comes to investing, the high bar to entry in the Lower Mainland has always made it very hard to be cash flow positive at the end of the month. And there were at times in the 20 teens where, okay, maybe you could squeak out a couple $100. And then it seemed to be sort of, you know, you're lucky if you could break even. And, you know, I've had investors buy even with and I'm not saying this has made the right approach, the hope that it's going to appreciate 10, 15 years, but they're subsidizing it at $200-300 a month, right? Because, and doing that in Vancouver works in the long run just because of the inflow of people and the appreciation that we usually see. But now, with the interest rates being where they are, strata fees being higher, property taxes, insurance, you know, that's another disincentive. I don't know what you guys are seeing, if you're seeing any areas or product types where there's a little bit more of a balance coming in, and it's possible to break even if you're buying into the market.
Not locally.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything, right? You gotta you gotta be putting like 30 to 35% down for things to make sense. So, and that's just for a, you know, a condo basically, right? So that's a lot of money to invest. I still think long-term if you're able to buy a property as an investment property and it makes sense, then I think still think you should go for it. But you know, it's like you kind of mentioned, it's just a higher bar to kind of get in. So if you have the funds to do it, I think it's great. But it's who has 35% to invest in a property these days.
Can I ask you guys a question about this? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Norm.
I've recently been made aware through a client, you know, they're maybe wanting to downsize and still buy that investment property. And I think for cases like that, you know, where they just park their money, it's not very liquid and they just get that routine paycheck, you know, I think it can still make sense, but, you know, their kids may have to deal with it if they hold on to it till they pass and, you know, higher, you know, capital gain rate. You know, it's not the end of the world. We're still paying capital gains tax on it. It's just a higher rate. And I think that's a perfect example of someone who may actually ignore the rules and just buy anyways for that routine paycheck.
Great. Okay, question for you guys, because going along with what EJ was talking about, long-term investment, like real estate, and I think we all agree with that. It's not meant to be a quick fix, you know, quick flip kind of thing. But do you think now with the capital gains that have come out and a bunch of the other pieces with this, and us having a provincial election coming up within this year, and then a federal election next year, and it sounds like there's change, you know, changes in the wind happening with all these things. Do you think there is an opportunity here to potentially buy? Now, this is a lot of speculative things, so I'm just hypothetically throwing it out there. Do you think this is an opportunity to buy, thinking that the, you know, future governments may change things or rules may change down the road? Or do you think this is kind of the new normal we're heading down with that? And even hearing winds of, you know, will they come after even our own personal primary residences for capital gains soon or not? But just want to throw that out there. Don't put that one in there. But do you think there's an opportunity here for somebody who's a long-term investor to potentially buy, maybe seeing there might be some changes coming down the line?
Tyson, you stole my thunder.
Sorry.
I mean, that was the one point I was going to make is that, look, governments change. New governments come in place. And there's nothing to say that if new federal government is elected 12, 15 months from now, that they're going to say, no, we're going right back to the way it was. And they certainly seem to be inclined to that position. So I think that's that's always a possibility that maybe not so much provincially, but federally anyway, that you see a change in the government and they you know, try to do make it a little bit more tax friendly and tax efficient for investors.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's okay. You know, I think it always kind of comes down when I talk to my clients is that you know, if you're looking at buying into real estate, just look at your finances. Does it make sense? Can you sustain it? All this investing stuff is great, but don't make it as your main kind of thing. Like, I have to buy this place so I can make 200K in 3 years. If that's what you're gonna do, like, don't even bother. I already said it's not worth it because I can't guarantee that. But you can make some strategic moves, as I kind of mentioned, is with your kind of principal residence to get into a place that you really, an area that you like, find something that needs a bit of work. You know, and it's also not fun to, you know, do a renovation and having to deal with all that. But, you know, it can be a good opportunity to make some money with real estate. But yeah, if the focus is that get rich quick through real estate, it's just not going to work. And I kind of talk to my clients is that it's a bonus if all of a sudden that appreciation kind of comes in. The big thing with investment properties is you're kind of, you know, that tenant's going to be paying down your mortgage every month. And I tell them in 25 years, your worst case scenario is that the price is the same and that tenant has paid down your whole mortgage. Yes, you have paid additional expenses and so on, but you can't bank on that appreciation. I hope that in 15 or 20 years, and based on the previous real estate markets and so on, that it will kind of go up, but that is a bonus. You cannot rely on that appreciation.
Smart.
Yeah, yeah. I've always called that appreciation, you know, that 15-year appreciation. That's a great point, EJ. And this is a long-term thing. Get rich slowly. I always call it the invisible income. You know, you've got this invisible income working for you, but he only shows up right at the end. Um, now, go quick point though, and I hope you're sitting down. You got your seatbelts on. But there was about several years ago, I recall there was some talk about introducing capital gains taxes on our principal residence. Have you heard about this before, Norm?
Unfortunately, I have heard of
You
it.
don't look too excited.
I
But
think that's a big contentious item. I think if a politician brought that up, that would be uncharted territories. I think it would be a minefield. I don't think it would end well for them. So I think it would not be on their platform, and maybe something that they would roll into effect after they get elected or try to. I don't think that would be an election platform that they would stand on.
yeah,
Sorry, one quick thing about your previous question as well. I think in the previous few weeks, there may have been the odd seller who is just at a point in their life where maybe they don't have any kids, they've made all this money anyways. They would rather give that uh, reduction in price to a nice young buyer versus giving that extra capital gain to the government. So I
yeah.
have heard of the odd case here and there where some sellers are just thinking, you know what, just sell the property, and I'd rather some buyer make, get a good deal. Is it a wise investment to buy an investment property? I think if one has long-term, you know, plans, then yes, sure. Um, but I think the good deals would have already had to have occurred by today, where you're getting a huge incentive to buy and to buy with the dates that the seller is looking for to save on that tax money. So I think those days are kind of over. And that was probably only, what, 1 or 2% of the capital gains type of sales. I think very few of those people actually just gave a really good deal.
Yeah, yeah. Guys, let's move along. Let's introduce a couple more topics here at the end. I'll throw one out here right off the bat. Strata bylaws. We've run into one where working with a couple, they have a child, so it's the three of them. It's a big 1-bedroom, could be converted into a 2-bedroom. Strata bylaws say maximum 3 occupants. Well, what if they want to have a child, right? So now this isn't going to work for their situation. What strata bylaws have you run into that have caused issues for your buyers in the past?
I've seen that occupant restriction quite often, actually, and I've seen one recently where they didn't end up selling. They had an accepted offer and it fell apart because of that. It was a young couple with one kid and they were planning another one, and it was a 1-bedroom. And we're going to see more and more of that because of affordability and growing families. We're going to see it. As much as I would lobby to get that removed, what happens with rentals? Why can't they have 4 or 5 people in a, I don't see it really happening that much, but there could be a bunch of bunk beds and people, living like that in a rent and just making it a boarding house
Yeah.
in a condo. And yeah, there's no difference with tenants and owners, but at the same time, I mean, people are just going to end up running it as a cash cow.
Yeah, it's
Guys?
interesting with that kind of buzz. I also seen that kind of restriction. Interesting enough, actually owned an investment property, and the tenants actually had 1 kid when they moved in, and then they had 2 more. I don't even know about the third one over there, but they were technically over the allowable occupancy. But those bylaws are interesting because it just depends on the strata. Sometimes they have that stuff over there. If sometimes even the council knows that they're breaking the rules, but if it's not an issue, then they don't kind of enforce it, right? So these guys were great tenants. They stayed for a long time, and they kind of left on their own when they needed to have a bigger place. But it is interesting because if all of a sudden they said they wanted to enforce it, unfortunately, I'd have to let them know, I'm sorry, like I can't do anything over here. It's actually in the bylaws that you can't stay over here, which is kind of interesting. Another one that is probably a big one that you guys have probably dealt with some of your clients is the pet restriction on the size. So I don't even know, I'm going to butcher it over there, but it's like 17 inches or 18 inches from the dog's shoulder, neck, whatever. I don't even know. And like you're looking at, it's like, get over your dog. Like, let's go and see. And then you're trying to push the dog down to make it smaller. Like, I don't know, but it's yeah, it's very interesting because, you know, people love their pets, and having those kind of bylaws where they can only be a certain size. I've had people who said, hey, what the first thing they ask the realtor is, what's the restrictions for dogs? Because they have bigger dogs, and you know, for them, they would have bought it because there are a lot of places where they kind of have that restriction for size.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more in stratas now. At least I'm finding where, yeah, they just now have changed that pet restriction to 2 dogs, 2 cats, or 1 dog and 1 cat. And then it says
or a reasonable amount of fish or something, right?
Ooh,
like
what's reasonable? It clarifies it. I have my 18 iguanas in my place. Like, is that reasonable? Or like, yeah, but that's one. I understand the occupancy with people, but if somebody's having a kid, like, because I understand, because it's probably, is it adding to your infrastructure of your plumbing and the load on the building and all that sort of stuff. But you know, kids don't take up a whole lot. I think the thing that they affect the most is probably noise for the person below you, if there's any sort of thing with that. But yeah, that's a tricky one, Christian, because you're right. If you want to have a second kid, but you're only allowed 3 people in your place, but if you look at the principle of it, they're not adding more to, like, you know, I don't know how much, like, I know newborns poop a lot, but it's not going into your plumbing. It's and so on and so forth and other stuff. So it's interesting to see what other changes will happen. But
Yeah, apparently there's a case before the Human Rights Tribunal on this right now. It's hasn't been resolved yet, and so it looks like they want to you know, have some more clarification on this, because it seems antiquated. It does seem.
Yeah.
I get what Norm was saying earlier. You don't want to turn the strata unit into a rooming house where you got, you know, 6 students sharing it, right? Coming and going from the place. It's meant to defeat that. But at the same time, if you've got a couple in there and they want to have a child or a second child, I think that's in a separate category. You don't want to dissuade people from having children. Sorry, Norm.
yeah.
And that's just the thing too. Again, this is not legal advice, but I've also heard that it's not enforceable because of the human rights code. Again, I haven't verified that, but that's what I've heard multiple times. And would an owner actually want these bylaws? It becomes more restrictive. I've seen cases where people don't remove subjects because of it. You know, people want flexibility. You don't want to be tied to you know, I have to sell now because I've had a kid and I'm in a 1-bedroom. With the way affordability has been going, this is 5, 6, 7 years ago. I've seen, you know, families of 3 or 4 in a 1-bedroom, and I'm sure it's 10 times worse now. So we're going to see it. We're going to see it more. You know, would you actually want that bylaw in your building? I personally don't think so, but I agree with Christian. I don't think you want to have a bunch of rooming houses either, because if you're disincentivizing landlords and people are turning it into a student housing, you know, that's not a good situation either.
Exactly. Norm, let's throw it to you for the last topic here. You wanted to talk about rental tenancy issues.
So just a quick point. I mean, I've, you know, recently had to help a client serve notice on a property, and, you know, they were emailing the notice. I said, hold on a sec. I'm looking on the RTB site and everything's been moved. I don't know, you know, I always need to reconfirm it because I don't do this all the time. I needed to reconfirm when is notice deemed to be received. That's all been moved around. It's actually in the 2-month notice now. It's all nicely, neatly laid out for tenants so they know their rights, which sure is great. But should we be adding in a new form, the RTB-51, which is tenant and landlord opting in for email communication? So for the landlord to be able to serve notice, why don't we just put that into the tenancy agreement, a check mark, and, you know, a quick disclosure that, if you opt in, you can also be served notice to end tenancy via email instead of another new form. I think there's a lot of extra forms that are now needed, which shouldn't be needed. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess my question is, should we just be doing an opt-in? There's the rights for tenants have been increasing so much. Is it time to simplify things? Which I personally think it is.
Norm, let me ask you a question for our viewers. If the tenant hasn't opted in to receiving email communications, how would a landlord serve notice?
The best way right now is hand delivering it. And there's another form, proof of what was it called now? Proof of service. So where the tenant has to fill it in that they have, received it, and a witness can fill in, yes, I saw the landlord, serve the notice. But if that's not going to happen, if they're away for, vacation, the only option left really is posting notice on the door. And I'm sorry, but a tenant who's been paying their rent on time, and it's an unfortunate position, but they come home to an eviction notice posted on the door, it really sends a harsh, inaccurate message of what's actually transpiring. And I think landlords don't want to do it because they know how much of a slap in the face it is. So I think it's time to get into the 2000s and adopt email method of communication. If bankers and lawyers talk about faxes, why can't, property managers talk about email?
Just on that note, there's in the OAKWYN office downtown, there's a photo there with a guy and another guy chatting, and he says, fax. Why don't you just send it over on a dinosaur? So you're right. Yeah, email might work. EJ, Tyson.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that they kind of simplify things. Well, they should be simplifying things just to kind of make it easier. As Norm kind of mentioned, sometimes, it's a tough thing to kind of do to take, a 2-month notice to end tenancy, bring it over to them like with schedules and whatnot. So, sending an email would be a lot easier, so they could, have enough time to, find a place versus having to organize a time to hand over a letter. It seems kind of interesting that it would be a separate document when it literally could be just attached to that tenancy agreement. Like, they don't even have to change form, just put it towards the end over there, and then you just sign it. Like, that doesn't make any sense that someone would say, no, I actually want you to hand deliver it. Or maybe a tenant would want it. Maybe would want that to get it hand delivered, so he wouldn't be able to email. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no,
Tyson?
I think email would be nice. This is how people communicate. I think there's also ways to even track, legally emails as far as open rates and all that sort of stuff too, is to make sure, I think the biggest thing, the biggest challenge too is when you get stonewalled by a tenant too. Like if they're preventing any sort of way of you being able to hand over notice, like is there possible ways to do it, right? And that's a challenge. But no, I think, yeah, I agree, Christian. Let's get in with the times. And it seems that although I know government agencies sometimes are really slow to adapt and slow to move and those kind of things, but this one sounds like it should be a no-brainer.
All right, guys,
Especially,
we're coming up. Oh, go ahead, Norm.
especially if the tenant's on vacation. I mean, they can find out,
Yeah.
earlier versus coming home to, oh, I guess the landlord didn't have, enough time to notify me. Now it's posted on the door, right? They could have
Yeah.
started plans before.
Well,
Yeah.
we're assuming good nature on the part of the tenant. I mean, there are tenants that are not very cooperative, and they will make themselves scarce. And so now the landlord's having to find. I've run into this situation before where the landlord's having to go over. We're having to go over to the tenant, knock on the door, and they're not even answering the door. So now you have to post it, right? Because they've just cut off all the lines of communication, right?
Well, we know someone who's even they put their dog by the front door, tied it to the front door in a railing, and aggressive dog, so you can't even post it to the front door. So
That's a new one. Thanks,
yeah,
Tyson.
yeah. So you guys need any ideas out there?
Maybe we can edit that part out of the show just so nobody gets any ideas.
It's true.
Time to open up a dog rental business.
There you go.
Yeah, vicious Rottweiler there, right on the front doorstep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've come up to the top of the hour, guys. Thanks very much for joining us, for being available, and to you, viewer, for joining us. If you made it this long, if you have any comments or questions, leave them below, or reach out to these gentlemen. You should be able to find their phone numbers, whether it's in a YouTube link or in a Facebook link, just below. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Dude, I do this every time. How the? Oh, there it is.